Hey guys, I'm Mark,
I'm Alon.
and welcome to another episode of The Next Man Up. Hey man, good to see you again.
What's up, Mark?
I don't know about you, but I'm having a lot of fun through these conversations.
Yeah.
And it, it's not just about having fun, but
It helps.
it helps. It's a big topic that we're talking about, lots of different directions to go, but just to be able to do it with somebody like you, to have a partner like that, it's fantastic.
Dude,
so
likewise, man.
thanks for hanging with me.
Yeah, man. Thank you for letting me hang with you.
When we finished the previous episode, you had something that really was on your heart and mind that we didn't have a chance to get to. And so I wanted to tee that up this time around. And it really comes down to this idea of what did we learn? What can we learn from our own fathers and from those experiences? So let me just put that on the table and let you take it.
Because I think it stemmed from the part where we were talking about failures and some of the things we feel like were mistakes that we've done in the past with our boys, and walking this manhood deal out, this rite of passage deal. And one of the things I think of is my dad and what he did well and what he didn't do well. Well, that right there becomes a hard thing because I actually have two dads.
Yeah.
I have my biological dad, and then I have my surrogate dad, who raised me since I was 13 or so, and but I've been able to over the years be able to see the positives, the successes, and the failures of them trying to be dads with me, and apply that to my life. And so, man, my surrogate dad was just great.
He was a lifesaver, literally, for you.
Literally saved my life.
Yeah.
I always, it's funny when I think man, Alon could have been a crazy sociopath killer. I could have just blown up the world and smiled as it went, because I was a lost kid.
Yeah.
Completely lost kid. And when my surrogate dad got into my life, he just helped me see the North Star pretty much, and just pointed me in the right direction. And it's been great, and he's done things he's the one who taught me how to drive a stick in my car. He's the one who helped me get my license. He's the one who I went to when I had issues about girls, to what I want to be when I grow up, to just anything. He's the dude who's helped me out with a lot of stuff, and he was there, and he tried his best. There was some things that he messed up on too. I remember he brought me and tried to bring me into Boy Scouts or something like that, and I learned really quick.
I don't see that.
I don't do it. You know what I mean? It's bro, you out here with hatchets and little short shorts.
Yeah, that's not you.
Yeah, it's man. I love to sit by a fire like any man, but honestly, I'm not gonna live out there.
Yeah.
And whatever, I look back and I could see him really trying his best to show me what a real man looks like, and even he's hot tempered, and so I could see him blowing off the handles as I look back and think back in the past and stuff, and and him apologizing, which worked for me, was something that we talked about last episode. And so my dad, he showed me how to be kind. And I remember him, I had my car, my car brakes. I was young, married something. And I remember he had called and he's like, "What's going on?" I was frustrated and angry. My brakes had gone on my car and I was having a hard time replacing them. And real quick, he was just like, "You know what? I'll be right over." It's this idea of just being kind, going out of your way to help somebody else like that. Man, a lot of that stuff is stuck with me, and so for him, I've seen my good and my bad, but good and stuff that's failures, and I've been able to apply that going, this is the kind of man I want to be. I want to be the kind of man who is kind to others. I want to be the kind of man that, is going to stick with something even when it's hard. Like, you know what I mean? I'm going to be the kind of man that, loves his family, cares for his wife, and, is there for his kids. I learned that from him, and I applied it through my life. You know what I mean? And also, there's things about him that I'm like, dude, nope. I don't want to be that, and I put that in.
Yeah.
Like, so I put that in a positive spin. Like, I want to be a man that's this, because it's opposite of some of the things that I saw, like, in him that didn't jive with me.
Yeah.
Right. And then my biological dad is the same. We don't have me and my biological dad. We don't have a great relationship. He's very distant. He's been distant since I've known him. We don't talk on a frequent level. He was out of my life when I was like 7, and then he came back in 16. I went down to go meet him because I found him, and there's a sense of like I've always felt like I was the one who was pressing the relationship, and he never really came along.
Yeah.
It wasn't like a relationship at all. It was like he was dragging his heels and I was pulling all the time.
That's not a relationship
and
at
that's
that point,
not,
right?
Yeah, you know what I'm saying? It's not. And so but even in that, I remember just growing up, and it was like this negative picture of him. And yeah, he's done some things that aren't cool, and whatnot, but I was able to take that picture and turn it into something positive by going where he was neglectful, I want to be attentive.
Yeah.
I want to be a man who's attentive to the things that he's about, where maybe he abandoned, what, I want to care and parent. I want to nurture. Where maybe he missed things like birthdays and, Christmases and things that happen with school and awards and whatever. I'm going to be a present father for my kids. You know what I'm saying? That's a positive spin.
Right.
And so for any dad out there listening, you can have a really great relationship with your dad, or you can have a really not so good relationship with your dad. You might even consider it to be a nightmare. No matter what, there's this opportunity in the midst of being a person that learns and gives that what you learned and lessons that you learned to your kid. You can take some of that stuff from either of those pictures. You know what I mean? And that's huge. It's really
huge.
big. And that, when I didn't want to have kids,
Really?
Yeah. Me and my wife first started dating. Kids came up, and I was like, I would have a kid on my deathbed.
Wow.
Basically. And with my last breath, I'll wave. I did not want to have kids at all, because the parenting, from my perspective, seemed to be just something that was just foreign, And yeah, I had my surrogate dad, but my biological dad and mom had, they had broken relationships with each other, and they had a broken relationship with me. And so why would I want to bring a kid into that, without having a good figurehead that I can really pull from, or taught me and whatever, and pass that on to them. I just didn't want to do it. I didn't want to do it at all. But when I had my first kid, I remember being so nervous. And the first thing I thought was, I'm going to fail as a dad.
Yeah.
Why? Because my dad failed.
Right.
You know what I'm saying?
So you just assumed and kind of took that upon yourself.
And that was with my daughter. And I had a son. By then it's I've learned a lot more, but I'm breathing. I'm like, oh my God, I got a son. That was really, parenting for any kid, whether it's a boy or a girl, is going to be different in the sense of he's going to change you being a dad. And
right.
It's no, yeah, you be a dad for both. But I think for me, it was I have another male that I'm going to have to raise up.
Yeah.
And this is crazy to me.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? But I drew from, well, what were the good things that I learned? And what were the things that didn't really sit well with me, or that were negative to me, that I could turn around into a positive? And man, I've been able to pass those on to my son, man. And I'm going to continue to do that. And looking at things through that way, man, like I said, I don't know where you're at with your relationship with your dad. out there, listeners, and as you're doing this thing to raise your kid, but you can definitely glean from them. Don't miss out on that pool. You know, you can fish in that pool.
This may be putting you a little bit on the spot. I think I hear it in your voice, but I don't think we've ever had this specific of a conversation. But what I hear is some forgiveness that you have extended to your biological dad. So even that in and of itself, the whole idea of showing forgiveness, demonstrating it, understanding forgiveness, showing that for your children, that's got to be huge too.
Oh, it's really big. Like, I mean, honestly, I think that was the nail that like cracked the glass for my hard heart was forgiveness. Like, I think that was one of the first nuggets for me in becoming the man that I am today.
Wow.
Without forgiveness, like, I don't think I'd be here.
Yeah. You have everything was against you.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah, man.
Kids at that age, shoot, at any age,
right?
We want the approval, the affection, the attention of our fathers. We just do.
Yeah.
And to not have it at an early and developing age, it can be so damaging, you know? I mean, all you got to do is look around, look at inner cities, look at, I don't need to list them all, but there's so many examples of what happens when dad is not around. And you had all of those reasons and yet went a different direction.
Forgiveness, dude.
Yeah. It's huge.
Learning to forgive was really huge for me. And that's one of the things that I pass on to my kids. And like, since we were talking about, you know, being a man, like that's one of the things I pass on to my son is the ability to forgive and to ask for forgiveness. Like, man, that sometimes I think a lot of some of the world's issues that we're seeing today, like I know they're huge and it's complex, don't get me wrong, but like, man, sometimes I think, man, if we can just forgive and learn to forgive, and receive forgiveness, like, dude, that can really change a lot.
It's a choice.
You know what I'm saying?
And you have made that choice, and as a result, you and your entire family and all the people in your influence, in your circle, are better off for it.
Yeah, man. Yeah, dude. What about you,
man? So
like,
the idea that's coming to mind, the word that's coming to mind is a guide, you know, that dads can be a guide for kids. And if you think about the guide doesn't do the work for the kid or for the followers, I guess I should say it that way. I'm sort of picturing an excursion, you know, let's say it's a mountain climbing excursion where you've got a guide, you've hired somebody to lead you, to show you the way. You still got to walk.
Yeah.
You still got to carry your pack. You got to pull your weight as you've talked. You got to be a teammate. But I have this idea, this vision of dads being a guide. And when I look at my own life, that's exactly what my dad was for me.
That's cool, man.
Not perfect by any means. My story really could not be any more different than yours. Biological dad is my only dad.
Yeah.
And he's still active. He's still my dad. He still speaks into my life today. I still long for his attention and his affection. And I've always had it. And yet it's still that desire to continue to have it.
Sure, man.
He showed me through his consistency, through his involvement. I don't know if you said it quite this way, but he showed up. He was always there. Physically, he was always there. He was at my sporting events. He was at my school events. He was at my church events. He was there. Yeah. And I may have mentioned this in the past, but part of that for him was his dad wasn't. His mom wasn't. They were around, but they weren't there at his events.
Okay.
So his decision point was, as a dad, I'm going to be there. I'm going to be there at home. I'm going to be there on the road. I'm going to travel. Even today, that extends into my children. And they live about 3 hours one way drive. And he will come down for a 30 to 60 minute thing.
That's really cool, man.
And then he'll turn around and go back.
Go back.
and I'm like, really? You don't have to do this. But after a while, I realized he's a grown man, and this is his decision. This is how he is giving himself to his kids and his grandkids. So he was there.
That's cool.
Physically. He was also there emotionally. He was there with his words and his consistency. He showed me what it meant to love a woman, to love my mom, his wife. He chose her long before they decided to have kids. And
That's cool.
You don't get to choose your kids, right? So he showed me what it meant to love her and to serve her. And they have really different personalities, very different, and it creates some friction. I see that more now as an adult than I did as a kid. I just knew they loved each other and they were together. I never had to worry about them not being together, even when there were some disagreements. And in those disagreements, there was respect and honor. There was passion, and there was expression, but there was no disrespect. And there was never any fear that I had that this isn't always going to be, I'm not sure if that came out right. I never had any concerns that they wouldn't always be together and be there for me and for my brother. The other thing that comes to mind as I think about my dad and what he's taught me is, as I get older, I'm starting to see him from a different perspective, and not from a negative perspective, but I realize, there's something that I don't really like. So here's a good example. Sort of like the fish is the last to notice water, right? That example for me was somebody pointed out that when my dad refers to me or is speaking to me, he seldom uses my first name. He just says son. Well, that's all I've ever known, right? Mm-hmm. Until somebody pointed out, like, why does he do that? You have a name. Why doesn't he use your name? And so now I realize, okay, well, I learned all of these things from my dad, some of them intentional, some of them unintentional, just personality or styles or whatever. And this is where I'm going to deviate a little bit. I'm not going to be just like him. I'm going to be just like me. And I'm going to refer to my children by their given names, not just on a regular basis, son or daughter. And that's not a big deal, but it's a small example of just owning who I am.
Yeah, man.
Being who I was created to be, taking the example that was given and doing it, dare I say, my way, or leaning into it that is consistent and authentic to who I am. Saying it that way doesn't make it sound so selfish. But here's another example. I was a kid. I don't even remember how old I was. Maybe 10, maybe 12, and I repeated a phrase that I didn't even understand. I knew in that context it meant upset, and I didn't even know what it meant at the time, but it was PO'd. Okay, so you know what that means. I know what that means now. Maybe it's not so culturally taboo, but in my family back then, it was a big deal. And boy, he ripped me apart. Okay. Like, don't you ever use that language. You cannot say those things, not in this household. And I remember feeling on my heels defensive, like, what did I do? I don't even know what that means. Where did I go wrong? So after that, he cooled down. We had a bit of a conversation, and he talked about leaning into me a little bit, and the apology. I'm sorry, I was probably a little strong. Here's what that word means. So it was a teaching moment. Like, oh yeah, okay. Well, now I can see why you were offended. Well, so what I take on from that is just be a little softer, okay? Yeah. Be a little softer with my kids, understand them a little bit better. Don't be so quick to just pile on and jump on. and be willing to listen. So you got something you want to say here, right?
No, I'm agreeing with a lot that you're saying, because like I think that's what I mean when I say that, like, there's things that just didn't jive with me. Like I want to be a man, like you said, like a man of myself, and so like with the things that don't jive, I'm not gonna jump into them.
Yeah. Yeah.
I'm just not.
Yep. And that's part of our responsibility, right? Of taking on the mantle, becoming our own men, and taking the examples that we have been given, and then being intentional about how we live out those examples and become our own example for our boys.
Absolutely.
So I think the message that or one of the messages that we're trying to bring forth here in our own stories and looking back in our own experiences is that we really received, or what spoke the loudest to us as boys growing up, you and me, and probably many of our listeners too, isn't so much what Dad said, but how he behaved.
Yeah.
Like that behavior that was consistent, whether good or bad, that behavior that was consistent that we came to expect, or the behavior that was out of character, that caught us off guard, maybe gave us a different feeling in that moment. But I think what we're really emphasizing here is the importance of that behavioral component that Dad brings to the table.
And it's like, it leads to us like having a long sense of a feeling of that's attached to that.
Yeah.
It's like there's this, emotion that there are emotions connected to the memories that we have of our dads in the past, whether good or bad.
Yep.
You know what I mean? Like for a while there, for me, when I thought about my dad, it was anger.
Right.
I just got angry because his behavior upset me so much. And it bothered me so much that it just left me feeling frustrated. And the only way to deal with that frustration was just to be angry.
Right.
And that was hard, or sadness or whatever. But like, there are things also that, at least for my surrogate dad, that I remember that makes me feel great. Like there's an emotion of happiness, of joy, of being content with what he delivered, like to me as a dad.
Yeah.
That just really spoke to me, but it all stemmed from the way that he behaved. Being present, being there, loving, kindness. Even when I look back and I saw that he messed up and just spoke out of his temper. But I look back and we joke about it, we joke about some of the things, like, Dad, wow, you were really angry back then. And like, and his response would be, I was just a knucklehead. I was upset and didn't know how to handle you guys and whatnot, but we pulled through.
But you recognize that as inconsistent with the other pattern of behavior,
Exactly.
So I mean, it's a moment that stands out. You got to process it and work through it. But you recognize that it wasn't necessarily who he was, because it's not how he had shown up previously all those other times.
Exactly, man.
It's interesting you bring up the whole idea of feeling and emotion. When I think about my dad, I have that contentment, I have satisfaction, I have this joy of relationship, even from my early days, and it's continued into my adulthood to now it's really a friendship. And I can go to him with questions. He can come to me with questions. It grew into this adult friendship out of the father-son deal. But that story I shared with you earlier, I remember that feeling of like, oh no, I'm in trouble. What did I do? I don't know what I did. What happened? Dad's really upset. I've let him down. I mean, there was some strong emotions in there. Sure. And it's not the only time I saw my dad get upset. My mom was, for the most part, a stay-at-home mom. And whenever she said, we're going to talk to your dad when he gets home, I'm like, oh, crap, I've crossed the line, right? So I knew when Dad would get upset, but when he exploded like that, I'm feeling like I don't know what I did.
Yeah.
And it was an intense feeling, and then it resolved.
Sure.
because that was out of character. He exploded pretty quickly. Who knows? Maybe he had a horrific day, and I just was downstream from that. But those emotions are so they're so integrated into our memories. And I think that's why we don't really remember the things per se that were said. We just remember the experience. We remember the feelings, and it comes back to like what we were saying. It's so important for the behavior of dads to be consistent with where they want their kids to end up.
Absolutely.
Does that make sense?
Yeah, it totally makes sense.
You know, like you gotta live it. You gotta model it. You don't have to be perfect, but you got. It's way more important for you to live it and demonstrate than it is for you to just say, do this, do that. That doesn't work. And that's not a guide either.
No.
You know, that's not teaching them. That's just more of a.
That's enforcing.
Yeah, it's a disengaged boss
Just,
that's saying, go do this
Yeah.
without really engaging and helping them along the way. Anyway, this was a good topic.
Yeah, man.
you know?
I'm glad we jumped into this one. This was good.
There's so much there. Our dads can be so influential.
They are.
And it has such an impact on our lives at all stages.
Yeah.
You know, that that's why we do what we do, right? That's why we're having this conversation, to encourage fathers to really lean in and take advantage of the opportunity they can have to make such a positive
Huge
and impact on their
Yep.
kids.
And influence. Yep.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Mark, thank you so much,
Yeah,
man.
thank you, man. This has been good.
Yeah, it's been great. Until next.
Hey, listeners, thanks for journeying with us on this Next Man Up podcast. You know, we would love to hear from you. Maybe you have a question or an idea, perhaps a topic for us to consider. If that's you and you want to reach out to us, you can get us at feedback@thenextmanup.com. That's feedback@thenextmanup.com. Again, we'd love to hear from you. Until next time, we'll see you later.